But before all that, anyone who has had a pet, who's loved a pet, knows the unique bond that can be shared, providing unconditional love. Of course, they totally do. And they are such loyal companions. So when one dies, it is only natural to grieve for the loss. Here with advice is clinical psychologist Susan Delaney and vet Angela Hickey. You're both very, very welcome to the show. And you've brought some gorgeous little doggies, which we'll talk about in a minute. But first, I just want to ask you, Susan, just I suppose, in Ireland, it's kind of, I'm not saying unacceptable, but a lot of people would nearly be embarrassed to grieve for a pet as an adult.
Well, I think a pet lover, if you ask them, they'd say, I know I'll be very upset when my dog dies or when the cat dies. I think sometimes people are surprised by the depth of their feeling, and that's where I think people can get embarrassed.
Yeah, well, I understand that totally myself, but I've always felt that it was nearly like if you talk about pets too much, or if you kind of link them too much in a kind of way that, you know, you'd be as close to them as you would be to a human, or, you know, love them as much, that people think that there's something wrong with you.
Yeah, and you know, fellow pet lovers would understand that when you describe it as a loss, and it is grief. We grieve when we lose what's important to us.
What type of emotions should we experience, or do we experience, after the loss of a pet, especially a pet that's been with us for a long time?
Any range of emotions, more very similar. It's a grief process, so it's going to be very similar to the way we would grieve somebody close to us. Probably the easiest way to say it is people can feel out of sorts.
Okay.
We think of people being sad or teary, but being irritable is equally part of grief. And people can have physical symptoms like not sleeping well, not eating well, finding their concentration and attention poor. Those things, I think, are equally part of grief, but the range of emotions will be as variable as the person themselves.
And it's a totally acceptable process. You should go with it, not
yes,
fight
but I
it.
think we need to name it as that. But when someone will say, I know I'll be sad when he dies, but we don't always link that together maybe then to not sleeping well, you know, a couple of months later. And we can do it to ourselves. We might start saying to ourselves, and I'm getting a bit silly about this, but I also think we're very vulnerable when we're grieving. And if someone else in any way suggests that we're being a bit over the top or a bit of a drama queen, I think it makes the process very difficult.
We're looking at some beautiful pets here. Some of these pets are still with us and some have passed away. But it just shows you, of course, they're so cute. And a lot of their owners, and, you know, taking these photographs would have gone to a lot of trouble and obviously cherish these photos. Little dog there called Minx, a little cat called Lily. And Angela, coming to you on that, a person who's worked with animals for many, many years as a vet, what do you think is the easiest way? Is there an easy process to go through, or would you have advice on somebody who has to maybe put an animal to sleep?
Well, I think the most important thing is that there's some preparation for it, and that, you know, that people maybe would consider as the animal ages. Like Jiva here now, she's heading for 13. I'm already starting to talk to the children about, you know, her span is kind of getting close to the end, and we have to start thinking about what we would like to do at the end of her life.
How is Jiva? Is she well?
Oh, she's very well. She has a slight heart murmur, but apart from that, she's doing very well. But as time goes by, you know, I think as we approach the end of an animal's life, it's important to start maybe taking more pictures, little videos, finding ways to hold on to the memories, you know, of the lovely times we've had with them.
And how would you prepare children? Because children especially, I suppose, probably like your own, would have grown up with an animal. Like, for them, it's almost like another sibling.
Yeah.
How do you prepare them for inevitability of this?
Well, I think talking about it is terribly important, and you know, being really honest about what might happen and how we might approach it, and maybe making some plans around it in advance. I think that will really help when it comes to the actual time, that if we've talked about it already and prepared somewhat for it, then the blow will be easier to take.
Yeah.
And I think we'll also have the grieving process because we've already faced it in ourselves, and we know we're going to be sad and upset, and we you know, maybe planning some little rituals at the time, so that we know there's something we can do. Like for people, there's a funeral, there's a whole ritual around it.
That's true.
And that helps in the acceptance and the coming to terms with what has happened. And you know, it's a communal thing. There's more than just the single person involved, you know. So in a family situation, it's great to prepare like that and to
you
plan
say as
things.
well maybe that you could put an animal to sleep in their home. Will a vet do that for you?
Yes, indeed. Vets are very willing. It takes more time, obviously, so it would have to be planned in advance, and it's only in certain situations, obviously, that is possible, because obviously if there was a sudden accident or traumatic death, then we couldn't do that. But it's certainly a lovely way to perform the euthanasia in the person's own home, in a situation where the animal is relaxed, it's in its own environment, and it's a kind of an easier letting go, I think, than in a clinical environment.
This leaflet here is from the Irish Hospice Foundation, and it is grieving the loss of a pet. And there is... Tell us, Susan, basically what's in this. It explains to you what you should do.
Well, there's not a lot of shoulds in grieving. The only should we always say is you should do what suits you. The idea of doing the leaflet, we have a series of bereavement leaflets, is really to validate that as a loss that needs to be grieved. So there's just some information in it around how people might feel and what their choices are.
So accept grief as normal, I guess, would be the first bit of advice.
To accept that it is grief. You know, that we say, I'm sad, but that there actually is a grieving process and it takes time, and that you're accepting it, acknowledging it. And then secondly, that you're...
Sharing your emotions, I guess.
Yeah, that you have people who get it. And that may need to be other pet lovers. People who have no time for animals in their life may not be the best people to support you right now.
And they probably wouldn't be the best if you talk about having a ceremony. But I mean, you say, and you agree with her, Angela, as a vet, of course, as well, that maybe a little ceremony, especially with children involved, is a good thing.
It is a good thing. Sarah, I might say maybe a ritual. It might be no more than having a toast or making a scrapbook, but having something little. That's what we do in our society. That's how we mark important events. And the more that kids can be involved in it, the more important. And to follow what Angela said, I think it's very important for the kids to be involved, not just because of the death of the pet, but because also for a lot of children this will be their first brush with death. And it provides that kind of a teachable moment where you can have a conversation about death.
That's actually very important on that note. There is a very realistic side that, I mean, on to more serious things in life that they may have to, obviously will have to encounter. A death of a parent or a friend or a sibling, unfortunately, as time goes on, maybe. So I suppose the way you handle that is very important at the time.
Very much so,
It just gives you those options. If you do a quick run to the shop and replace the hamster, you might feel you're saving them a little discomfort, but we can't protect children from grief.
And finally, just to ask this to both of you, maybe yourself, Susan, first, should you replace a pet quickly?
There's, again, the shoulds I would stay away from, of saying there's choices around that. The only thing I'd be saying to people is take your time. It may be right for you and it may not, and there may be other options around just replacing the pet if pets are important in your life and you want to have animals. But take your time. Everyone has advice on this. Be very cautious who you take advice from.
How would you see this,
Yes,
Angela?
as Susan said, I would advise also taking time. There can be the exceptional time when suddenly, you know, an animal might come into your life suddenly, and you'll just find you'll take it on. But in general, the grieving process might be interrupted by that. So it's important to have taken time to grieve the actual pet that's gone and not try and replace it as such.
Yeah, just,
you know, have room in your heart and in your home for a new pet, and for all that entails, because it's a big thing to take on a new pet.
Just before we leave, there is a pet memorial garden opening by the DSPCA in Dublin. I don't know whether it's open now, but it's opening very soon. It is. Thank you both very much for coming in and bringing the gorgeous animals, and of course a beautiful Siberian Husky there as well.
Yes, thank you.
Chica, is it?
Chica.
She's lovely. Okay, thanks again.
Okay,
You're very welcome.
Okay, and all the advice that we spoke about today on pet bereavement is on our website. You can take a look as well at our Airtel page, which is 340. Shana.